Thank you, Ms. Elmers. Mr. Jacobs, a couple questions for you. We talked, because I haven't had a chance to talk much about the Brooks Act. You talked about the qualification-based selection system, where supposedly you are not competing on price, you compete on qualifications, and then the government will negotiate with the most qualified provider. And I think you compared it to what we call the best values process. Did I get that right? Is that what they're?
I think in my testimony, best value was used in conjunction with the Federal Supply Service. But I think the definition of value has inherently to do with, I think, what we're trying to communicate.
Now, my understanding of the Brooks Act, which is fairly limited, is that if we did that, that would be in violation of the Brooks Act, wouldn't it?
Correct. If architectural services are awarded based on the Federal Supply Schedule, that would be in violation of the Brooks Act because, and I think this has everything to do with the nature of architectural services as opposed to a physical commodity, which I believe is the intent to be covered by the Federal Supply Service. So the professional services that we sell consist of time, experience, ingenuity, and we are, we spend time with our clients, with agencies, very early on in a process that frequently takes a number of years. And so I may be able to give you one example how I think we can affect cost control specifically much more accurately at the very upfront end of a job, as opposed to, and even if you might have built your own house, or the worst thing that can happen is 2 weeks before you want to move in, something doesn't work, and now you have to make changes. It is very cost prohibitive to do this because everybody's already on site, and now you have to order materials and so forth. If you compare that with the ability that we as planners and problem solvers have at the beginning of a multi-year process that it takes to design and engineer a building, we can run various scenarios that up front can show which design or which approach can yield long-term savings. And so this is how, I think fundamentally, how the architectural profession sees its values, or its value with regards to providing accurate information for decision makers. So if we do our job right, it puts the government in a position to make informed and the most accurate decisions, and those are the ones up front that can actually save real dollars long term.
You also mentioned something, and I've done some work with architects in my previous life, but you mentioned something that I wasn't familiar with. Did I hear you say correctly that architects are prohibited in some states from competing on price?
That is correct.
So give me an example. What states would that be?
I'd actually have to look that up. I was generally, or I am generally informed that out of the 50 states, I think 2, and I can't point you to which ones they are, but 2 of those, that the statutes of the profession in those states prohibit people from just competing on price.
All right, let's assume for sake of this discussion that's correct. I have no reason to think that it's not. If the government is actually employing this best value process in either intentional or unintentional violation of the Brooks Act, wouldn't that automatically disqualify every single architect in those 2 states from competing?
I think based on professional ethics standards, yes, it would. But I think this is somewhat of a gray area in that it puts architects in this difficult position. As you know, the economic climate is such that I think firms in a case like that may be forced to make a decision in interpreting their professional ethics standards, or basically still applying for Federal work.
And your last comment, and I'm going to ask each of you this before it's finished, your last comment, you urged the GSA to do something regarding expanding participation. I couldn't write as fast as you were speaking. Say that for me again, because I'm going to have the GSA come up in a second. I'll be happy to pursue that topic with you.
Yes, we would like to the committee to consider urging the GSA to expand the Design Excellence Program. And this is the exact program that we were involved in this Federal office building that I described. And I think this is for probably 3 primary reasons. This Design Excellence Program explicitly meets the intent of the Brooks Act, in our opinion, because it is a two-stage selection process. And actually, before you get to that process, all of these opportunities are posted on FedBizOps, completely open and transparent and accessible, easily accessible to all. And then this two-stage selection process is first a broad qualification of experience and expertise. And based on that, the government then creates a short list. And typically members of that short list get to an interview or in a competition mode where they literally are pitted against each other in terms of who is more experienced, innovative, and actually might have some real ideas with design. So because that process is literally set out to give the government sort of the benefits of the competitive environment we are in, we believe, and our experience is that yields a very good result.
Thank you, Mr. Jacobs. Mr. Foreman, a couple of questions for you. Walk me through the process. I ran a small business. I had some encounters with the SBA, but I never did what you all are testifying about today. Walk me through the process by which you all won the OS2 BPA, and tell me if you participated in any of the GSA outreach programs as they developed the requirements for that contract.
Chairman Mulvaney, we did. I'll answer the second question first, if that's all right. We did participate in some of the outreach meetings that GSA had, and we provided input. And we work many times with NOPA on providing that input and trying to effect change on those types of solicitations. In terms of responding to the bid, as I indicated in my testimony, we have been a Schedule 75 holder since 2002. We meet the requirements, and so when it came to responding to the technical requirements of the bid and the competitiveness of the bid in bidding on the market basket items and how that filters down to other items outside of just the market basket, I would state I think we were the third, I believe, lowest bidder on the market basket. So we competed both on a technical, from a technical standpoint, met the requirements of reporting and whatnot, and the socioeconomic, being a small business, and also price.
You mentioned in your testimony that the GSA had pledged to be more helpful to small business through this OS2 BPA process. How did they do? In fairness, and again, I'm going to have to ask them the same question in a few minutes. So
sure. I mean, I think to some degree, numbers speak for themselves, and there's a higher degree of the overall spend going through small business today than there was in the past. But I think that it's a higher percentage of the spend to a fewer number of small businesses. I would say that you'd have to look at it both ways. Fewer number of dealers are getting a bigger piece of the pie. And in the case of us, we are again, cooperative, viewed as a consortium of dealers by the Federal Government. And we have a number of dealers who never had any piece of that business in the past and have been able to participate in our program and share in some of the sales to the Federal Government.
Thank you, Mr. Foreman. Mr. Allen, I have some questions for you, but they're very similar to what Mrs. Elmer's asked you. In consideration of time, I'm instructed we're going to have votes in about 45 minutes. I'm going to skip you now and go to Mr. Tucker. Mr. Tucker, very briefly, I take it you oppose the OS2 BPA process.
Not so much that I oppose the process as much as the way it was implemented and the way it limited the participation of eligible dealers who were qualified to perform under the program. And there were two other teaming agreements that were in place before the second FSSI that didn't get awards. That took the group that I was running with had over 100 members. There was another group called AOPD with 50 or 60 members. Those two groups basically got washed out of the process, and other GSA contract holders, either that didn't participate or wanted to participate in the program, were given the restrictions of having to limit the products that they offered on their GSA schedule as a condition of participating in a dealer in another program. So a company like mine, we would have had to, basically wipe out the last 40% of our business with agencies that we had other agreements that we were still fulfilling in order to try and jump over and be a participating dealer, with an awarded company.
And is the circumstance that you just described what you were referring to when you said that the FSSI process was a sort of a de facto or, in essence, a form of contract bundling? Is that what you're talking about when you use those words?
That's how it appears to me that it came, because you had 400, about 400 dealers competitively participating for the business, and especially in pocket markets. So you have small companies with a contract that maybe were outside a military base or next to a veterans hospital or something, where getting a schedule, they had a great opportunity to do business, but they didn't have the wherewithal to compete for a national contract or a national BPA like this, and as a result, they got, swept away by the wave when this came through. And even us being in the Washington, D.C. area and a veteran company by most measures, we didn't have a way to effectively get in the game, even though we were, right on the cusp of being qualified for an award.
All right, I'm going to press you on something that actually wasn't in your presentation today, but it's in your written testimony, which deals with the Statement of Administration Policy, the SAP. Because I think you're encouraging that the GSA apply that instead of the traditional rulemaking. As a lawmaker, did I mischaracterize that?
No, I think that, that's, we represent a lot of companies, and some got awards and some didn't. So we saw that as a compromise vehicle that could allow other companies to get in if the guy outside the Veterans Hospital or the military base had something in writing from the administration that says FSSI is not mandatory. He may be able to use that to counter the written guidelines that agency put in place that made FSSI mandatory.
And I'll just ask you, Mr. Tucker, as a lawmaker, SAP doesn't appeal to me very much. You recognize, of course, number one, it doesn't have the force of law, so it may not be as powerful a tool as you think that it is. And perhaps more importantly, it doesn't provide for comment period input from the business community. It's sort of a fait accompli. It's a done deal once the administration issues it. So I guess I don't have a question for you, but I just tell you that there will be folks who will press you on that simply because we'd like to participate in the process and let.
That was a compromise solution to
All right.
try and come up with something that could help our members.
Thank you. Gentlemen, again, I'm not trying to rush anybody through, but they do tell me that we're operating under some loose time constraints. A quick question to each of you. Mr. Jacobs, I think I know what the answer to your question is, so I'll start with Mr. Allen. Mr. Allen, in a few minutes here, the GSA is going to come up, other folks from the government. Any questions you want me to put to them?
I think the biggest question for GSA, Mr. Chairman, is what they're going to do in terms of these discussions that we talked about, the demand-based changes. I think that on some level, an administrative level, I understand what they're trying to achieve, but I don't know that the process that they're going to propose to go through is the best way. What other processes, what other alternatives are there that would allow them to manage their administrative challenges without causing this type of disruption to their overall business?
Thank you. I'm sure that was one of the questions we had as well. So, Mr. Foreman?
If I were to ask a question, it would be, would there be additional consideration of the cooperative business model as a means to help GSA achieve some of its goal in terms of reducing administrative burden in terms of managing hundreds of contracts when it can, utilize a cooperative and in essence support small business, numbers of small businesses through one contract?
Mr. Tucker?
Just that they would continue the dialogue with us and with a short-term solution in mind of trying to get more participation from companies that have held GSA contracts in the past and without any burdensome requirement.
Thank you, gentlemen. I thank all of you for your time, for your effort, for your input. I especially thank those of you who traveled today for this. And I'll tell you what I tell everybody who comes to these things, because it's some folks come in and say, Mr. Mulvaney, no one showed up for this. Was this a complete waste of time? I can assure you that it's not. I can assure you that this is where the dialogue starts on policymaking, on rulemaking, on everything. You might have made a comment today, Mr. Jacobs, regarding the Design Excellence Program that someone sitting in the back will pick up and write about in one of the local trades, and that will end up being a discussion item at your next symposium, and a year from now it will end up being a piece of legislation. We see that every single time. So please do not be discouraged by the fact that there wasn't a lot of media, a lot of press. This is an extraordinarily helpful and extraordinary part of the process, and you gentlemen have contributed greatly to the dialogue today, and I really appreciate your time. So thank you for coming in. With that, we'll excuse you and ask the next folks to come up.
Thank you. Thank you.